What's your background in music? Is it something that you've always been involved in, or was it a decision that you made further down the line?
Well, I mean, I've common to a lot of people, I was always into music when I was growing up. I played in bands when I was a teenager, but I kind of got to the stage where I was more interested in writing music than playing it, and kind of gradually got more and more interested in the engineering kind of production side as well. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of, I mean, it's a development, you know, like I said, I was in bands, but then I kind of got into going out clubbing and house and techno, and you know, eventually into drum and bass and jungle. So yeah, I mean, it was certainly something that I've always felt really strongly about. I've always kind of, yeah, wanted to kind of spend my time doing, you know. So yeah, I mean, to be able to do it as a living is great, you know, you can't complain at all. I'd still describe it as dubstep. I mean, certainly the stuff that I'm doing as, you know, the scuba stuff is dubstep. I mean, I don't, you know, there's obviously the odd tune here and there which is, you know, stylistically different, maybe at a different tempo or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's what I would call dubstep anyway. The thing about dubstep though is it's become this kind of stereotype thing now. So a lot of people who think they know dubstep and think they, you know what dubstep is, only refer to quite a narrow, what I would see is quite a narrow part of it from other places. I mean, the cliche one now is the dubstep techno thing, which is already quite hackneyed, which I'm not really, you know, I'm not really too enamored with the whole kind of, that whole thing. I mean, obviously it's like, you know, I was into techno before I was into any other kind of electronic music, so you know, it's always been a kind of important thing for me musically. But it's gotten to the stage now where it's just like, okay, there's this dubstep techno stuff, you know, and that's what that is, you know. And to me, it's like, you know, there's so many more things that go into it than that, you know. It's become quite a kind of lazy way of putting certain artists and certain kind of DJs and, you know, whatever else into a box for people to think about, and it's just, yeah, it's not that useful from my perspective. I mean, you're always going to be influenced to a certain extent by your surroundings. The stuff that I've been doing as SCB, which is my kind of proper house techno project, I don't know if I would have done that if I'd stayed living in London. That's, I think, pretty much a direct result of going to Panorama Bar at 9 in the morning and staying there till God knows when, which you can't really do in London. So, so yeah, I mean, it's kind of swings and roundabouts really. There's a lot of really interesting music happening in Berlin. Equally, there's a lot of really interesting music happening in London, but equally in both places, there's a lot of incredibly boring music happening as well. So, you know, you try and take the good stuff and concentrate on that. Berlin was a place that, you know, I played a few times, really liked the city, really kind of got into the whole thing, that whole kind of vibe, for want of a better word. And so I was kind of thinking about moving and thinking about various different destinations. I knew a couple of people that had moved from London to Berlin just before I did. And I obviously knew people that were putting on parties there. So it just kind of, it seemed like an obvious thing to do. So, you know, I didn't really think too deeply about it. It kind of just got to a stage where I was like, okay, I want to leave, let's just go there. Put my stuff in the car and drove over, and, you know, I haven't really regretted it at all in any way, to be honest. I mean, I like coming back to London. Kind of thing happening in Berlin for, you know, long before I arrived. Like I said, I'd played at the parties, you know, so I knew a fair bit about it. And there was definitely a following for the music in the city, you know, but that was kind of obvious, but no one had kind of tried to do a big party. So I was kind of knocking around the idea, and the guy who runs the Surefire agency moved over at the same time as me, and we were kind of like knocking around ideas together, thinking about places to do it. And obviously in Berlin, like, the #1 club is Berghain, Panorama Bar. So obviously that was the #1 choice of a place to do it. But before we started doing it there was no outside promoters working at the venue at all, like none. So and it's got quite a reputation for being quite kind of closed, quite German and quite kind of, you know, there's a kind of myth that if you speak English in the queue you won't get into the club and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, as two kind of English guys, you know, wanting to do a night there, we figured, okay, no chance. But I mean, they were amazingly kind of receptive to the idea from the start. We didn't really have to persuade them at all, and it's been really good. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you know, it's a risk for everyone involved, including, you know, the people who run the club. Obviously for us, because it's a, you know, it's a big room. It's like, you know, you fit 1,000 people in there easy, sort of thing. So, and it's always been techno. The night we did was the first time there'd been any music in there apart from techno ever. So it was like just doing it, and doing it on a Friday night, and is, yeah, like I say, a risk. So I mean, when the first one went so well, you know, there was a queue of sort of 300 people outside the door at 6 in the morning, sort of thing. That's how, you know, that's how good the first one was in terms of numbers, and just the kind of atmosphere inside was amazing as well. It's kind of, I think what the party reminds me of was the kind of early, well, not the early dubstep parties, but the parties where after the music had kind of got a bit of a following, you know, a decent sized following, before it had kind of gone into this kind of, you know, sort of semi-mainstream drum and bass takeover phase, which we find ourselves now, where it was this kind of like a really kind of good family atmosphere, you know, and that's what it's been like. It's been great. Yeah, really, really, really cool.
Maybe going out on a limb here, but how do you think running a night over at this place would compare to running it in somewhere in London, somewhere like Plastic People or Fabric or something like that?
It's difficult to say, really. I mean, obviously the key difference with Berlin is that, you know, it's not the kind of club scene generally is, you know, it's fundamentally different to London. Musically different, obviously. You know, it's the kind of capital of house techno, and it's got what London doesn't have. I mean, it's got house and techno clubs, but what it lacks is a house and techno scene. So, you know, there's, you know, all the DJs live in Berlin, all the producers live in Berlin, like everyone. That's where, you know, people, you know, so if you go out to a club in Berlin, you'll see DJs just out, which you won't see in house techno clubs in London, but you might do a dubstep night in London. So that's the kind of flip side to it. So London's got its kind of dubstep, drum and bass, and that's the London sound, you know. So the difference in Berlin is you're not doing Berlin music, you know, you're doing London music in Berlin. The other difference is, I think, Berghain, generally speaking, is completely unique in terms of, certainly in my experience of clubs, in terms of the way it's run, in terms of the kind of, just the whole atmosphere of it, you know. It's like everything is about, basically it's about the music and about creating an environment for, you know, for people to have a good time and have, you know, just kind of like a cut off from the outside world, you know. So for example, like what I was saying about the queue, like, you know, there's always a massive queue, but they don't let the club get too full. So clubs in London, they let, you know, you like that, you know, they don't allow that to happen at Berghain. Like you've always got, you know, yeah, sometimes it's packed, but like you never get that whole kind of, you know, which I really hate about London. It's like a gig, you know, it's not like a club. A club is somewhere where you go and dance, you know, you don't get fucking, you know, it's not a mosh pit type thing, you know, that's not how it should be anyway. So yeah, so for me, I mean, certainly in terms of clubs that I've been associated with and been involved with, it's chalk and cheese, to be honest, to anywhere else.
Was Hot Flush something that formed when you moved to Berlin?
No, the label started in 2003, so it predates my Berlin living for quite a while. It's kind of like, you know, it started really, really small though, obviously. I mean, I started it with a friend of mine, and, you know, we had no clue about running a label, you know, zero, like nothing. So it was purely, you know, we didn't even have distribution. We figured, yeah, we'll drive the record around some shops, like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, kind of utopian, kind of like acid house kind of ideal. But, you know, and it kind of, took a while to grow, as, you know, as you'd expect. But I mean, we had quite a kind of lofty vision for it at the start. I mean, we wanted it to be, you know, a kind of like all-encompassing, wide-ranging kind of just kind of collision of musical styles type thing. I mean, the reason for that was because we were kind of DJ partnership, and we played like an incredibly wide range of stuff. Certainly, well, I mean, basically, our kind of thing was like, you've got to be able to mix it. So it was all within a certain tempo, but we went from like broken beat, breaks, house, garage, like, you know, whatever you could find that you could mix in. So that's kind of what we wanted the label to be, and it's sort of, it becoming a dubstep label was really by accident.
How do you balance being a full-time musician and running Substance with running Hot Flush these days, since it's grown from the grassroots acid techno kind of vibe?
By not having very much time off, to be honest. Actually, I'm not going to stop moaning, but last autumn, when I was finishing the album, it was like from the end of September to Christmas, I had 1 day off in 3 months. So that was, yeah, that's how it, not a very good work-life balance.
Oh, we don't mind a bit of a moan on Intruders. But what are your ambitions for the label these days?
Well, I mean, it's the same as really when it started, you know, it's just to be wide-ranging and, you know, just to kind of release good music. You know, it's massive cliche to say that as a kind of label owner, but like, you know, I think, you know, we want to be successful, you know, we want to sell records, don't get me wrong, but, you know, without compromising on the musical side, you know. So it's like, yeah, I mean, fundamentally just release music that we like.
And what keeps you releasing your music through Hot Flush as opposed to going through another label?
I don't think I could deal with being told what to do, to be honest. I think, I mean, to be honest, when I'm working with artists on, you know, on the kind of A&R side on the label, you know, I try and give people as much control as possible, but I don't think that's massively common, you know, with labels. I mean, I really let people get on with it, you know, and with the artwork and all the rest of it. Like, you know, if I think someone is, you know, that good, then they should be able to, you know, and that's how I'd like to be treated myself. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe it'd be like a really useful process or something, but yeah, it doesn't really happen. I mean, I've got a bit of a problem with authority generally. I think it's why I had to quit work and do this for a living. I mean, on the label, it's pretty, you know, self-explanatory really. I mean, Mount Kimbie have got their album coming out in June, which they're working on, which they've hopefully finished by now. Which is, you know, I mean, they've just been, you know, amazing the last year or so. Obviously, Joy Orbison is, you know, come from nowhere and is doing some amazing stuff. Sire as well, I think what he's doing is really interesting because he's obviously got that kind of Berlin techno thing, but he's doing it with a very kind of like a UK kind of slant on it, which I think is really interesting stuff. We've just signed a new project by Machine Drum and a friend of his, which is called Sepulchre, which is the first release of which is coming out, I think will be in late May, early June, which is like, again, kind of, it's different, but it's kind of like, I mean, everything that we kind of sign is like, I don't know, it's got that Hot Flush thing, you know, it's completely indefinable, but I mean, I can always hear, you know, when I listen to some, you know, demo that's been sent in, if it's like, you know, it's a Hot Flush record, I can always hear it immediately, and it's got that, so hopefully that's a good thing. I mean, other than, you know, outside the label, it's still, to be honest, like what I've kind of been really impressed with in the last couple of years is, you know, for a start, the Hessen Audio guys, so Ramadan Man, Panjaya, and also Untold is doing, he's done stuff on the label, but like, yeah, I mean, those guys have been really killing it for ages. I mean, certainly Ramadan Man's new stuff is amazing. And also, Instrumental and D-Bridge have, you know, just been incredibly, I mean, inspirational is not a, you know, a word that I use lightly, but I mean, with those guys, it really has been, you know, since kind of beginning of 2009, just with the podcasts they were doing, yeah, really cool stuff. So, I mean, yeah, can't speak highly enough of those guys.
You seem to have a very clear idea of a kind of a brand identity for Hot Flush, but would you consider branching out and maybe signing, I don't know, like a soft indie rock artist, or, well, something better than that, but
well, I think there can be good soft indie rock, I'm sure. I think it's like I said, there's there's a hot flush kind of sound. I mean, it's not like I say, it's not like a set of dynamics, sort of musical dynamics. I think it's just more, I hate using the word, but there's kind of a vibe, like, terrible word, but like, it's kind of, so I mean, so I wouldn't necessarily restrict what we do as a label to anything really. I think if there was a soft indie rock band that I thought was appropriate, then yeah, why not?
Some possible hints at things to come on Hot Flush. But let's look at your music. What's the inspiration behind Triangulation?
I'm not sure if there was much inspiration behind it. No, I kind of sat down to write an album in January 2009. I didn't finish until Christmas. So there was a lot of kind of huffing and puffing and scrapping of material and just kind of general frustration along the way. So I mean, it was quite arduous. I mean, I think the three things that went into it musically was the kind of the house and techno thing, the kind of dubstep thing, and the experimental drum and bass, should we say. And yeah, I mean, those are the kind of three things that I found interesting, certainly musically, in the last maybe 18 months. So it was just, I like the challenge, generally speaking. The album writing challenge, generally speaking, is something that I find, it's kind of motivating. I think if you want to see yourself as an artist, then you've got to aspire to, to write albums. I think that's really what ultimately you get judged on. So, and it's something that and something that challenge thing is something that I enjoy. So I mean, it was kind of, but it was, like I say, it was hard going.
Concentrating on.
Yeah, I mean, the SCB thing is kind of, I've been enjoying doing it in the studio, which is sort of the main point of it, really. I think the problem about being in a position where you write music for a living is that it can turn into work, which is obviously, this the worst kiss of death. So it's kind of like, it's an experiment. It's this way of kind of keeping the studio fun. And to be honest, I play more and more sets where I'm playing slower and playing that kind of stuff. So really, I mean, the reason why I started doing it in the first place was to play music in those sets, and that is still really what motivates me writing those kind of tunes. So yeah, I mean, I think, well, the first proper SCB 12 came out recently, and there's going to be, I mean, we'll definitely do a few more. I mean, it's just, like I say, fun.
Going where the mood takes you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to keep an element of spontaneity to everything. Otherwise, it's quite easy to get kind of, I mean, bogged down is maybe the wrong word, but just kind of like set in your ways, maybe. And you see it, everywhere, with music, people just doing the same old thing, and I think you've got to try and avoid that.